Hello. All right. So very similar to the planche. One of our main aims with the front lever row is to get our hands as close to the hips as possible. That is because when we're finishing with our main goal, sorry, just whack the side of our front lever hold and front lever row, we want to have our hands in line with our hips. And again, it's this seesaw analogy of trying to get our balance point. What would that be called? Fulcrum? Is that what it is? At our hips, at our halfway point. This means we want to start doing this right from the off. So even with our rows, even with our entry level rows, we're going to be thinking about getting our hands towards our hips. This obviously makes it a lot more difficult because our usual rowing pattern is just pulling with the hands probably like at the rib cage, close towards the chest. But we're thinking about working towards that gold standard front lever hold, front lever row, where the position of the hands is at the hips. And so we're going to start with what's called an arc row, which is, as you see here, imagine you've got your TRX or your ring set up, you've got a slight bend in the knees, feet are placed a couple of feet away from the origin of the TRX or the rings, and you're actually going to be pulling your hands overhand grip, so knuckles facing up, into your hips. That means the elbows stay tucked in, and we're thinking about pulling hands towards our hips. So we're pulling and kind of creating an arc, hence the name arc row. So this is going to be a slight change for some of you who have been doing the front lever row, but on reflection, we may as well form these good habits right at the start, because that's what we're going to be using right at the end as well. That is your level 1 progression. You can see that there's going to be a lot of sub levels in between 1, 2, and as I'll show you, level 3. And it's all about moving your feet further under the rings or the TRX, so that basically we're going to be trying to line up the rings and the TRX with your hands, as you'll see. So the more parallel we bring our body to the floor, in this instance, from level 1 to 3, the more difficult the exercise is going to become. Level 2, I've walked my feet in a little bit here, so I'm almost parallel with the floor. You can create as many like sub levels as you like between these. This is going to be particularly important during a rep, but also in your mind, if you can kind of say this is my level 1 or this is my level 2, and you remember where your setup is, where your feet are, then that's going to be your kind of checkpoint to hit. Once you can complete some of the first rep, the first part of the first rep in that position, you know that it's time to walk the feet in as we move our body more parallel to the floor. So this is level 2. We're still thinking about that arc row. Oh, I've kind of missed it there as I've been chatting. See if I can move this back. So we're still thinking of the same thing. Squeeze the glutes, engage the core, pull the hands towards the hips in this arc row with the elbows tucked into the sides. And that is your level 2. So a little bit more difficult, but all we're doing is slowly walking the feet in to make it harder and harder. Now you can see level 3, body is parallel to the floor, knees are bent at 90 degrees, and I'm pulling my hands towards my hips as much as I can. This is where it's going to start to become difficult to do so. But as long as you can do it for some of the rep, then you know that you can progress on to level 4, which is going to be, that was just, this is another demonstration of level 3, sorry, really pulling the hands down towards the hips. And it's like an active pull down, as if you're almost like pulling something towards your hips. And then we're getting into level 4, which is this tuck lever row. So knees right up towards the chest. You can see a nice bend through my lumbar spine. So the lumbar spine is flexed. And this is essentially the inverse to the dip. We've got the dip at level 5 in our planche progressions. This is going to be the inverse of that, where we're tucking the knees into the chest, still really trying to drive our hands down to our hips and keeping the elbows tucked as we try and pull past our midline. This is going to be a real challenge. But as I said, if you can do this for part of your first rep, you've achieved that level and you move on to the next one, which is here. I think this must be level 5. And this is where we start to try and level the hips out to shoulder height. As you can see, I can't quite make it here. And part of doing that as well is that we can start to bring the knees to 90 degrees, which is going to be equally tough. So you can either try and do both or just one at a time. If you want to keep the knees tucked but try and bring your hips parallel to the shoulders, then that is what you can focus on, and then think about bringing the knees out at a later point. But you're still thinking of driving the hands down towards the hips. That's what we really want to focus on. And then I can't remember whether, I think this was my actual rep. Definitely looks like it. So trying my hardest to pull through this variation that's pretty much out of my strength range. So then I have to tuck my knees into this tuck lever row. And I can pretty much get myself up maybe 3/4 of the way before I have to come back down into this level 3 position, body parallel to the floor. I'm still trying to drive my hands towards my hips, but as you can see, it's pretty futile, but that's going to be part of it. And then the lowering phase is a bit of a messy tuck of the knees in to try and push myself to my absolute max on the lowering phase. And then eventually the feet come to the floor and the rep ends. So the front lever row is an interesting one because the onus is very much on you as to how difficult you make the exercise, particularly in that lowering phase. This is even more the case with the front lever row than with some others. With the force negative work, it is like part of the concept of the force negative stuff is that the onus is on you. But with the row, it's really about driving those hands down towards the hips and pushing yourself to those new levels, because we know we can always regress back. So you're very much in control of how difficult this row can become. But remember, we can regress ourselves back through the levels to match our current strength threshold based on all of the fatigue we've accumulated as we've been doing the exercise. So we're performing the arc row, we're using the TRX or the rings. If you really have to use a bar, you can, but I would recommend we go straight for the rings or the TRX. You're starting in that kind of 45-degree position, trying to work yourself down to parallel to the floor over time. And then we're thinking about the tuck lever row, getting the hips parallel to the shoulders, and eventually extending the legs out for our later levels. But I think a lot of people will be, they won't have the confidence in themselves to really push themselves through these first 3 levels if you feel like you're at the beginner stage of this row. Remember, it's just about trying. So if you can do this first one, where basically all of your weight is in your legs and you've just got a little bit of momentum to pull yourself up, like this was next to no effort. And that's not me saying I'm strong. That's saying the position of my body meant that my arms really didn't have to do much. Then we're moving into this position here. But I think a lot of people won't be confident enough to come into this depth straight away. You will be strong enough to perform some of the rep. If you can comfortably do level 1 and then, maybe a bit of an in-between, you will be strong enough to do at least some of the rep in that front lever row position where you start to come parallel to the floor. So just try it, and then we know we can manipulate the exercise by starting to walk our feet back and making the exercise easier, okay? So the more parallel we come to the floor, the harder it becomes. The more we walk our feet back away from the rings and their point of origin, the easier the exercise becomes. So if you're trying to pull yourself up, and in fact, I would probably recommend for the front lever row, I would recommend starting in your top position if you can. This becomes a little bit harder in the later stages, but there's a way to do that. For these first 3 levels in particular of the front lever row, I would recommend starting at the top. So if I pull myself up here, you'll see exactly what I mean. Come into the row starting here if you really don't feel like you have the pulling strength to get yourself up. Start here. Take that slow lower down, the force negative of actively trying to pull yourself up while gravity forces you down. And then from the bottom position, you can walk your feet back about a foot and then start the pulling process of trying to pull yourself back up. So that is what I'd recommend at these levels. That is how we will overcome the obstacle of getting into the bottom of the row position to start and thinking I won't be able to pull myself up here, because you definitely can, and you'll prove that you can once you get to that concentric portion of the lift. It's just a little bit nicer to start with the lowering phase in the most difficult position possible, because we know we're stronger in the lowering phase, and then from there we can pull ourselves up. But I went on a slight tangent there. To go back to what I wanted to say was that we are just attempting to do the most difficult exercise variation for us for a portion of the rep. So if you can pull yourself up 1 inch at a certain level, that is more than enough. And then you can just step the feet back and go again. Maybe you can get a few inches on this new regress level. And then you hit sticking point, you walk the feet back again, pull yourself up a little bit more, and so on and so on and so on. Keep hitting those checkpoints throughout the rep. And then eventually the rep finishes with you working at 100% of your strength threshold for that entire rep, because you've manipulated the position of your body throughout the entirety of it. Any questions on the front lever row, let me know. And then you've got this now, you've got the planche, you've got the pike, glute thrust. There are just a couple more to come. But any questions,